Welcome to Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin.
Today, we're going to be conducting an interview with Professor Brovkin regarding President Putin's 4-hour press conference, which took place yesterday. The format was fairly interesting, with over 2 million questions submitted by ordinary Russian citizens, as well as journalists on the floor. This year was the 21st time, and it took over 4.5 hours. The first question, Professor Brovkin, is how did Putin discuss Russians' objectives in Ukraine and whether there is any chance of more military mobilization taking place anytime soon?
Yes, I should preface it by saying that Ukraine was by far not the most prominent topic. And indeed, most of the attention was on domestic issues. But for foreign audiences, this was, of course, the key issue. And yes, indeed, there were some new elements in what Putin said about the Russian objectives in the Ukraine war, in the special military operation. Well, he made sure that everybody understood that he repeated well-known things that he had said originally in June 2024, and that was that Russia wanted not a ceasefire, as is being discussed in the West these days, and that it should be an international treaty with obligations, with lifting of sanctions, and the 4 provinces that Russia has declared as part of its in constitution as constituent parts of Russia, that they should be freed from Ukrainian presence, and then that there should be legitimate elections, legitimate government in Ukraine. We'll come back to that issue. This is the well-known ones. There's nothing new, but there was one interesting new element in what came up yesterday. One of the persons who asked the question introduced herself as Другая Ukraina, which means different Ukraine or another Ukraine. And he asked her who she represented, and she said that this was a movement that she represented. And the goal of the movement was, quote, to unify Ukrainian and Russian peoples. Now, the fact that this was brought up is important. And when he asked who is the leader of this movement, he said Moiseichuk. And Moiseichuk is a person who was a Russian protege and who was a prisoner in Zelensky's prison. And then he was released, and now he's in Russia. And so he's widely seen as a possible leader of those Ukrainians who want not only peace with Russia, but unity in some kind of a form, maybe as Belarus, maybe as independent state, maybe as a part of Russia, it's not known. But this is a new element in this. And the second new element, he also mentioned in a totally unrelated question that we have our boys or our people in Ukraine who are waiting for the arrival of the Russian troops, which also kind of implied that these people are probably not in Kherson, or not only in Kherson and Zaporozhye, but in some other parts of Ukraine who are waiting, as Putin put it, for the Russians, which kind of implies that there could be a different interpretation that expands it beyond the 4 provinces mentioned today.
And to follow up on the Ukrainian question, did he say that there's going to be any changes in the military strategy going forward?
Yes, he did. As he did mention some issues connected with the military strategy, and he spoke for about 5 minutes about the Oreshnik missile, and that is, as well known, was used in response to U.S. permission to strike Russia with ATACMS missiles. And then the Russians used the Oreshnik missiles, which is a supersonic missile, and he was talking a lot about it. He even, and this is what Western correspondents picked up, most of others, as the most important issue, when he said that no Western missile defense is capable of stopping Russian hypersonic missiles. And he suggested, let the West put whatever they want as a defense, and we can agree on a target in advance, for example, in Kiev. And then we will see if any of the anti-missile defense of the Western powers can work. And he clearly implied that it doesn't work. And one can add that today, this morning, the 20th of December, the Russians did use one more time a supersonic missile against the targets in Kiev. And the target was, by the way, the Ukrainian intelligence agency, which is suspected of being involved in the killing of General Kirillov, a commander of Russian anti-chemical weapons defense. So it could well be that Putin knew that this was going to happen, and the new target in Kiev was used.
And the third question was, how did Putin comment on the recent changes in the Russian nuclear doctrine?
He didn't specifically this time talk about the changes of the Russian nuclear doctrine, but he did refer to it, and he did actually imply kind of knowing that his audience is familiar with these changes because they were passed by the Duma, and there was a lot of discussion in recent weeks about it. But the bottom line is addressed actually not to Ukraine, but to Ukraine backers. And that is the changes were that Russia opens itself a possibility of using any weapon, including nuclear weapon, against those countries that are participants in war against Russia. And participation in war is defined as providing the kind of missiles and the kind of weapons that can hit the territory of Russia. And as Putin had many times explained, the Ukrainians simply cannot do it on their own. They don't have the codes, they don't have the satellites, they don't have the technology. So in other words, each time ATACMS missile hits Russia, that means American technicians and military personnel are doing it, which is now defined that Russia reserves the right to attack American targets in response to American missiles being shot at Russian targets.
And how did he comment on the international relations, specifically with the United States, the EU, and China?
Very interesting too. There were some new elements in his response. He, of course, had, as expected, plenty of praise to President Xi of China and to Modi of India, and he kept repeating that they're personal friends. And then he kept talking about the Europeans, especially the Germans, that they forgot what it means to be a sovereign nation. And he kept talking a lot about the sovereignty that Russia is defending its sovereignty, and that the European leaders of today forgot what it is to defend their own national interests and to be sovereign. It's very interesting in this context to note that at the very end of the press conference, somebody asked him who of the contemporary or former political leaders he would like to have a cup of tea. And he spoke for about 15 minutes, praising Chancellor Schroeder. He spoke very highly of President Chirac. He kept saying what a gentleman he was, and that he knew everything, that no matter what you ask, Chirac knew, and that Putin learned a great deal from Chirac. And he also said that he had he reminded the Western audience that there was a time when many of the Western leaders were his personal friends, including Berlusconi. And then he told a story that he went to a birthday of Gerhard, his friend, Chancellor Schroeder, and all the songs sung there were in English. And the only song that was performed in German was the Russian choir of the Cossacks. And so he kind of reminded his audience that there used to be a time when there were much better relations between Russia and Europe as now.
And to conclude with this, what do you think was Putin's overarching theme or message that he tried to convey to the domestic audience and then also to the foreign listeners?
Yes, I think that it's clearly there is a message. As far as the foreign audience is concerned, what I think the message was that Russia is back. Russia is strong. Russia has as he put it, the biggest and the best army in the world, and there's no challenge that it cannot overcome with its training, with its new military facilities, its missiles, its airplanes, and its well-trained army. So there's this projection of absolute confidence in any military challenge that could be forced. He also spoke to the West that Russia is number 4 in the PPP, purchasing power calculation of domestic national product, and he was also very proud of this, that Russia is back. Russia is a strong power again that cannot be ignored. This, I think, is the message to the West. To the domestic audience, I think he tried to come across, and I think he succeeded, as a caring person, as a caring leader, as the one who actually knows everything about the percentages of mortgages, and about the mother's subsidies, and about education, and about all kinds of things. And he did come across that he knows all that stuff. And I think it's very important for Russia, because Russia loves to have a czar type figure who takes care of its citizens. And I think Putin is projecting that image of a caring czar, a caring, he calls himself president, but it's no different than a czar in terms of centralization of authority and responsibility, confidence, and to some extent charisma. I think that's what the main takeaway is.
And that's all the questions I have for today.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you next time.